By the time the warning reached Dry Creek, number 4 had already passed the station. Clara Whitcomb saw the last passenger coach vanish into the rain. 4 minutes later, the telegraph sounder behind her began to chatter. The message came badly. A few clear letters. A station call. Then a wash of static that swallowed half a sentence. Edwin Vale bent over the key, pencil stalled above the page. He had taken Clara's job that morning. Now he could not tell what the man on the other end was trying to say. Clara could. Blackwater Bridge was down. Number 4 carried 71 passengers and 12 crew members. The train was running east, toward the gorge. There was no station between Dry Creek and the bridge, and the storm had already taken the wire. The superintendent asked for confirmation. Clara looked through the window at the wet rails. The train had a long loop around Harlan Ridge before it reached Blackwater. A horse could cut across the cattle trail and meet it inside the cut, but only if the rider left now. The company had taken her office key that morning and made it plain that she was not to touch railway property again. Clara crossed the siding and took the red lantern. That morning, Clara had worn the same black coat she wore to Samuel's funeral. She noticed that while standing in front of the station mirror, fastening the top button, the coat still carried a faint line of white dust near the hem from the frozen ground at the cemetery. She rubbed at it with her thumb, then stopped. There was no point. The Santa Rosa and Western Railway had summoned her to the depot at 8. Dry Creek was little more than a pause in the New Mexico territory. The main street had a general store, a blacksmith shop, a hotel with 6 rooms, and a church whose bell leaned slightly east. The depot stood beyond them, beside a water tank and 2 sidings. Its yellow paint had faded almost to brown. Trains stopped for coal, water, and orders. Sometimes that was enough to keep a town alive. Samuel Whitcomb arrived there in 1877. He brought 2 shirts, a telegraph manual, and a brass watch that lost almost a minute every week. Clara joined him 2 years later after a courtship carried mostly by letters. Samuel's letters were not graceful. He wrote about the weather, the price of lumber, and the distance between the depot and the house he hoped to build. In the 4th letter, after a full paragraph about roof shingles, he added that he loved her. Clara married him anyway. The railway listed Samuel as the operator. Clara's name appeared nowhere. At first, she did not care. She cooked, mended clothes, kept the household accounts, and helped him carry batteries when winter weakened them. Then one night, a freight order came over the line while Samuel was in bed with one of the headaches that blurred his vision. He tried to stand and walked into the washstand. Clara caught him by the arm. "Tell me what to do." Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, eyes closed, and tapped the code against the wooden frame with 2 fingers. That was the beginning. He taught her letters with a spoon at the supper table. When she guessed wrong, he sent the same letter again. He never told her to listen harder. He told her to listen differently. By spring, she knew the numbers and the short railway phrases operators used. By the end of the year, she could recognize some senders before they identified their stations. Asa Grady at Mesa Junction hit the key too hard when he was worried. Peter Lyle at Coyote Junction paused before the number 7. The night operator at Las Animas dragged his dashes after midnight. Samuel said most people copied the message. Clara copied the man. The railway knew she worked the line. Conductors handed orders to her when Samuel was outside checking the water tank. Engineers asked her whether a freight had cleared. During a dust storm in 1884, she stayed at the desk for 9 hours while Samuel repaired a relay and the station master played cards at the hotel. Nobody asked whether she was authorized then. Samuel found that funny on good days. On bad days, it made him quiet. "They trust the work," he once said. "They just do not want to write down who is doing it." He died in January of 1888. A freight car arrived with 3 sick men aboard. Samuel helped carry one of them to the hotel. 5 days later, fever took hold of him. The doctor rode through snow from Las Animas, but there was little to be done. Samuel burned for 8 days. Near the end, he spoke about old train orders and asked whether someone had repaired the porch step. Just before dawn on the last morning, his eyes cleared. "The wall relay sticks when it rains," he whispered. Clara leaned closer. "You are thinking about that now?" "Tap the case twice." "I know." He looked toward the wall where his office key hung beside his coat. "Keep the line honest." Those were the last words she understood. After the funeral, Clara returned to the depot because no replacement had come. The railway did not appoint her. It did not refuse her either. Dry Creek was small, and the company saved money by letting the arrangement continue. Harold Pike, the station master, signed the reports. Clara copied orders, logged trains, cleaned the contacts, checked the batteries, and answered the night wire. 7 months passed. No train was delayed because of her. No conductor complained about an order. Then Augustus Bell arrived from the district office in a private car with polished brass lamps and velvet curtains. Bell was broad through the chest and careful with his beard. His boots looked new. He carried a leather folder under one arm and spoke in the patient tone of a man who expected everyone else to be difficult. Clara was at the telegraph desk when he entered. A freight order was coming from Coyote Junction. She copied it, repeated it back, and handed the sheet to the conductor waiting at the window. Bell watched her finish. "Where is the operator?" Clara set down the pencil. "You just watched her." Harold Pike looked at the floor. Bell opened his folder. "The railway does not employ women as operators on this division. It has employed me since January. The company allowed a temporary arrangement after your husband's death. Temporary work still moves real trains." Bell's expression tightened, though only a little. "Mr. Edwin Vale will take over today." A young man stepped through the doorway behind him. Edwin was 28, thin-faced, and dressed in a brown suit that had not yet learned the shape of his body. He held his hat against his chest. He looked at Clara, then at the telegraph key. Bell explained that Edwin had worked as a relief operator in Missouri and Colorado. Clara asked whether Bell had read the station logs. He had. "Did you find an error?" "No." "Any complaint from a conductor?" "No." "Then what is the problem?" Bell closed the folder. "This is not about your ability." Clara waited. He did not finish the thought. Instead, he offered 2 weeks' wages in recognition of the help she had provided after Samuel's death. That was the word Bell chose. Help. Clara looked at the money on the desk. She had worked through winter nights, dust storms, and fever season. She had sent orders that kept trains apart on single track. Bell had reduced all of it to help. She left the money where it was. Then he asked for the office key. Samuel had worn it inside his vest on a leather loop. After his death, Clara kept it in her apron pocket. The brass had grown smooth where her thumb rubbed it. She placed it beside Bell's folder. Edwin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Harold Pike said nothing either. Clara collected Samuel's watch, her shawl, and the lunch she had packed before sunrise. 3 railway men stood on the platform as she left. Each had accepted orders from her. None met her eyes. By noon, the whole town knew. The blacksmith called Bell a fool. The hotel owner said the railway would regret it. 2 women from the church brought bread and preserves, then sat at Clara's kitchen table, speaking so gently that she wanted to shake both of them. She was not angry with Edwin. Dry Creek had already discovered that he sent money to his widowed mother and younger sister in Missouri. The town could learn a stranger's history before the dust settled behind his horse. What stayed with Clara was the silence in the station. People had trusted her orders whenever a train carried their sons, livestock, or mail. When Bell took the office key, most of them looked away. Later, they called the decision unfortunate. At 2 in the afternoon, rain began over Blackwater Mesa. The country around Dry Creek did not absorb water well. Months of heat baked the surface hard. Rain struck it, gathered fast, and went downhill carrying sticks, stones, and old fence posts. Clara stood beneath her porch roof and watched the western edge of the sky turn black. Blackwater Gorge lay east of town. The railway crossed it on a timber trestle 140 feet long. Samuel had never trusted that bridge. It had been repaired twice, both times after floods. He used to say the bridge looked best from a distance. At 3:30, Eli Turner rode into town from the Mesa Grant. He was 17 and covered with mud to the waist. His horse stumbled in front of the depot and stood with its head hanging low. Clara reached him before anyone came outside. "The lower road is gone," Eli said. "Blackwater came over both banks. Took the Grant footbridge, too. Did you see the railway trestle?" "Could not get near it. Trees were coming through the gorge." Clara turned toward the station. Bell's private car still sat on the siding. A culvert west of town had delayed his departure. Through the office window, Edwin was seated at the telegraph desk. Clara entered without knocking. Bell stood beside Pike's desk. "You no longer have business here," he said. "Blackwater is flooding." "We have heard." "Then hold number 4. Bell glanced at the train sheet. "The bridge was inspected last month. Last month there was no river running through the supports." Edwin looked over his shoulder. Number 4 had passed Dry Creek only minutes earlier. It did not stop there that day because it was running late and had already taken water at Coyote Junction. Bell told Edwin to call Mesa Junction and ask whether the eastern approach was clear. Edwin sent the call. No answer. He tried again. The sounder clicked weakly, then fell silent. Clara looked at the wall relay. "Tap the case twice." Edwin frowned. "The relay sticks in damp weather." Bell stepped between them. "Mr. Vale is the operator." Edwin tapped the wooden case. The sounder came alive. A burst of code rattled through the room, faint beneath the rain striking the roof. Edwin bent over the paper. "Mesa is reporting line trouble." "That is Asa Grady," Clara said. Edwin looked at her. "He is frightened." Bell asked what the message said. The sounder started again before Clara could answer. This time only pieces came through. "Blackwater. Center span gone. Number 4 eastbound." Then the line died. Edwin stared at the page. Harold Pike checked the passenger manifest. 71 passengers, he said. 12 crew. Clara looked at the station clock. Number 4 had passed Dry Creek 4 minutes earlier. The engineer had eased back because the rain had cut visibility, but the train was still moving faster than any horse could follow the rails. The railway did not run straight from town to Blackwater. It curved north around Harlan Ridge, then doubled back through a narrow rock cut before reaching the gorge. The track covered almost 11 miles. The cattle trail crossed the inside of the loop in a little more than 5. A rider on a strong horse might reach Harlan Cut first, but only by taking the cattle trail and losing no time. Bell ordered Edwin to send the emergency code toward Mesa and Coyote. Edwin tried both directions. The line east was dead, and the storm had weakened the western circuit until only scattered clicks returned. Clara reached for the key out of habit. Bell put his hand over it. "You are no longer authorized to transmit. The train is beyond the station. We need confirmation before anyone enters a flooded section. You have the warning. We have fragments." Clara looked at him. "How much of a bridge has to be gone before you count it?" Bell told Pike to send a rider for the section crew. They were 6 miles west repairing the culvert. Clara asked about the handcar. Bell refused to send it east until the track was inspected. The room went still except for rain and the faint hiss of the relay. Clara walked out. The freight shed stood across the siding. On its rear wall hung 2 red flags, a lantern with red glass and a canvas bag of railway torpedoes. The small metal charges could be strapped to a rail. A locomotive wheel crushing them made a report loud enough for an engineer to hear through wind, steam, and rain. Samuel had shown her how a flagman protected a blocked track. The torpedoes belonged on the rail, spaced apart, with a red signal farther ahead where the engineer could see it. Clara took the bag and the lantern. Harold Pike caught up with her outside. "You cannot get to the bridge in time." "I am not going to the bridge." He saw the torpedoes. Harlan cut. The train has to take the loop. I do not. Bell will say you stole company equipment. I will bring back whatever is left. She started toward the blacksmith shop. Eli called after her. His horse was spent, but his father's mare stood beneath the awning behind the forge. Mercy was a dark bay, 12 years old, broad in the chest, with a white mark above one hoof. Clara knew the mare. Samuel had borrowed her during a winter storm when the road to Mesa Grant disappeared under snow. Eli tightened the saddle while Clara tied the red lantern behind it. The lower trail is underwater, he said. Use the north path. The fence at Willow Draw washed out, so you can cut straight through. Edwin came running from the depot. For a moment, Clara thought the line had returned. It had not. I found the passing time, he said. Number 4 cleared Dry Creek 4 minutes before the warning. Clara put one boot in the stirrup. Edwin held Mercy's bridle. I should have understood the message. You have been here half a day. That is not much comfort. No, it is not. Bell shouted from the platform that Clara had no authority to enter railway property. She looked at Edwin. Keep trying the line. Then she turned Mercy toward the north trail. The mare ran with her head low against the rain. Water spread across the ruts in brown sheets. Clara did not drive her blindly. Mercy knew the ground better than she did. When the mare shortened her stride, Clara let her choose. When she found firm earth, Clara gave her rein. At Willow Draw, the trail disappeared beneath moving water. A fence post rolled past, followed by a dead chicken and half of a wooden crate. Mercy stopped. Clara leaned close to the mare's wet neck. Easy. Mercy stepped in. The water rose to her knees, then her belly. Twice the current shoved her sideways. Clara kept the reins loose and let the mare feel for the bottom. They came out on the far bank covered in mud. Beyond the draw, the trail climbed the inside of Harlan Ridge. To Clara's right, hidden by rock and rain, the railway followed the long outer curve. Somewhere on that curve, number 4 was gaining ground. The first whistle reached her as Mercy started uphill. It was still distant. Clara tried to judge the train's position from the sound, but the ridge threw the whistle back in strange directions. Samuel had warned her about that too. Mercy crested the trail and began down toward Harlan Cut. The second whistle came louder. Clara saw the track below, 2 wet rails disappearing between walls of red stone. The cut lay less than 4 miles from Blackwater Bridge. She dismounted before Mercy stopped moving. The ballast slid under her boots as she climbed. Her right foot went out. She fell and caught herself on one hand. A sharp stone opened her palm. She stayed down only long enough to breathe once. The rail was humming. Clara pulled 2 torpedoes from the bag. She ran west around the bend and fastened the first to the rail. Its lead straps were stiff and blood made her fingers slip. 10 yards farther west, she fixed the second charge to the same rail. The engineer would strike both before the headlamp reached her. The whistle sounded again. Close now. Clara ran east along the track, back toward the bridge, carrying the lantern. The rain had darkened the cut so much that the red flag would be nearly useless. She crouched behind the embankment and struck a match beneath her coat. The first flame died. The second held. The wick caught and a dull red glow filled the glass. A headlamp appeared around the western bend. Number 4 entered the cut with smoke pressed flat above the boiler and water flying from the wheels. The locomotive filled the narrow space between the rock walls. It seemed too large for the track under it. Clara stepped between the rails. The engineer gave one long blast. She swung the lantern. The train kept coming. At that distance, the man in the cab could not know whether she was signaling or trapped. Clara stayed where she was. The first torpedo exploded. The sound struck both rock walls and came back like gunfire. A moment later, the second charge went off. The whistle changed to short, hard blasts. Brakes seized along the train. Iron screamed against iron. Sparks flashed under the passenger cars. The locomotive came on with a force that made the ground tremble beneath Clara's boots. She kept the lantern moving until the headlamp swallowed everything else. Then she jumped. Her shoulder hit the embankment. She rolled through mud and loose stone while the engine passed the place where she had stood. The baggage car followed, then one passenger coach, then another. The wheels shrieked all the way through the cut. At last, the train stopped. For several seconds, Clara heard only rain and the hiss of steam. Doors opened. Men climbed down with lanterns. Engineer Thomas Keene reached her first. He was gray-bearded, soaked through, and angry in the way frightened men often were. "What were you doing on my track?" Clara pushed herself upright. "Blackwater Bridge is down." His face changed. "Who sent that?" "Mesa Junction." The wire failed. Conductor James Holloway came running from the rear cars. Clara repeated the warning. He looked east toward the gorge. "Do you have an order?" "No." Keene glanced at the flattened torpedo shells beside the rail. "How sure are you?" Clara held up her bleeding hand. "Sure enough." That answer did not satisfy a rule book, but it satisfied him. Keene sent 2 brakemen forward with lanterns. The men disappeared down the track toward Blackwater. Passengers crowded the windows. A salesman climbed down despite Holloway's warning. 2 soldiers followed. A doctor came out with his coat over his head. Questions moved from car to car, each person asking someone who knew no more than they did. Clara sat on a wet stone and wrapped a handkerchief around her palm. Mercy had pulled enough rope loose to reach her. Clara rested her forehead against the mare's neck. "You had the harder part," she said. Mercy shook rein from one ear. Edwin and Harold Pike arrived on horseback about 20 minutes later. Bell followed in a wagon, sitting beneath an oilskin while the driver fought the mud. Bell stepped down and demanded to know who had stopped the train. Keene pointed toward Clara. Bell began listing the offenses: taking railway property, entering the right-of-way, and stopping a scheduled passenger train without an order. Keene looked at him. "Would you rather I had kept moving?" Bell said the facts had not yet been established. For nearly 2 hours, everyone waited. Most of the passengers returned to the coaches to get out of the rain. Bell stayed beside the track, looking east whenever the wind shifted. Then the first brakeman came back, carrying a piece of bridge timber no longer than his arm. One end was black with river mud and torn apart around the bolts. The second man came behind him, hat in hand. "The center span is gone," he said. "The east support too. Rails are hanging over open water." Nobody spoke. Blackwater was less than 4 miles ahead. At the speed number 4 had been making after slowing for the storm, the train would have reached the gorge in about 8 minutes. Conductor Holloway sat down on the edge of the ballast. Keene removed his cap. A woman stepped from the passengers with a little boy beside her. The child carried a wooden horse with one wheel missing. The woman reached Clara and tried to speak. She could not. She took Clara's uninjured hand instead. Around them, people grew quiet. One soldier wrapped his blanket around an older man. The doctor looked toward the gorge. A young couple stood beneath the same coat, fingers locked together. Nobody cheered. For a while, the passengers simply stood there in the rain. Keene ordered everyone aboard. Number 4 would back slowly to Dry Creek and remain there until the line was safe. Before climbing into the cab, he stopped beside Clara. "Who taught you to protect a track that way?" "My husband." Keene nodded toward the lantern. "He taught you well." "He worried a lot?" "That may have helped." The train returned to Dry Creek at walking speed. Mercy had begun to favor her left foreleg, so Harold Pike offered to lead her back by the shorter cattle trail. Clara did not like leaving the mare, but Pike promised to walk both horses. Keene helped Clara into the baggage car, where rainwater ran across the floorboards. Edwin rode ahead while number 4 backed through the storm. By the time Clara reached Dry Creek, he had reopened the line toward Coyote, and word had spread through town. People who had no family aboard still came out with lanterns. Pike had reached the depot ahead of the train with Mercy. Eli pushed through the crowd and took the mare's reins. "You beat the train." Clara rubbed the mare's cheek. "By less than I care to think about." Bell called a meeting in the station office. Keene and Holloway came. Edwin stood beside the telegraph desk. Harold Pike stayed near the stove, hat in both hands. Bell acknowledged that the bridge had failed. Then he returned to Clara's violations, as though repeating them might make them larger. Keene waited until he finished. If she had obeyed every rule, where would my train be? Bell said an inquiry would determine which safeguards had failed. Keene asked again. Bell did not answer. Holloway placed the passenger manifest on the desk. There are 83 people on this list, he said. They would be in Blackwater if she had waited for your confirmation. Bell told him to mind his position. Edwin took the office key from his pocket and laid it on the desk. When the warning came through, I could not copy it, he said. Mrs. Whitcomb knew the sender by his hand. She knew the relay fault. She understood the message before I did. Bell looked at the office key. Are you resigning? Edwin swallowed. I am telling you what happened. Harold Pike stepped forward next. For 7 months, he had signed reports built from Clara's work. He placed the 2 weeks' wages beside the office key. I reported this station was operating normally, Pike said. That was Clara's work, not mine. Bell closed his folder. The company would investigate. Until then, Edwin would remain operator. Clara said nothing. She was tired, wet, and beginning to feel the cut in her palm now that there was no train left to stop. She went home after midnight. Samuel's watch lay on the table where she had left it that morning. She wound it, listened to the uneven ticking, and went to bed without removing her wet hairpins. At dawn, someone knocked. The woman from the train stood on the porch with her little boy. Her name was Rebecca Sloan. She was traveling to Fort Union to join her husband. The boy held out the wooden horse. Clara crouched. That looks important. He nodded. Then you keep it. He thought about this, then untied a tiny brass bell from the horse's neck. My papa says bells warn people. Clara held out her hand. The bell was light enough that she barely felt it land. 3 weeks later, the division manager came to Dry Creek. The bridge investigation had found rot inside 3 support timbers. A repair crew had covered the damage during the last inspection instead of replacing the beams. Augustus Bell had approved the report. The manager offered Clara the permanent position at the same wage Samuel had received. Clara read the paper twice. Will my name be on the reports? Yes. Not Harold's? Yours. She looked toward Edwin, who stood at the far end of the platform. He stays until he qualifies for a junction post. Same wage you promised him. The manager hesitated. Clara folded the paper. He agreed. She signed. Bell left Dry Creek with the division manager that afternoon. 3 months later, the company dismissed him after the bridge report and the passengers' statements reached headquarters. Edwin stayed for nearly a year. Clara taught him to copy what he heard instead of what he expected. She made him repeat any order that sounded wrong, even when the dispatcher became impatient. In rain, she let him struggle with the wall relay for a moment before reminding him to tap the case twice. When he left for a junction post in Colorado, Edwin shook her hand and thanked her for teaching him. Samuel's old office key remained in the top drawer of her desk. The railroad rebuilt Blackwater Bridge with stone piers and iron spans. On the first official crossing, Thomas Keene stopped number 4 before the gorge and brought Clara into the cab. Passengers were not supposed to ride there. Keene said he had developed doubts about some rules. The locomotive moved onto the new bridge at a crawl. Below them, Blackwater ran narrow and brown between the rocks. Under a clear sky, the gorge looked smaller than Clara remembered. Halfway across, Keene handed her the whistle cord. She pulled once. The sound traveled across the mesa toward Dry Creek. Years passed. Travelers still asked about the widow who stopped number 4. Some versions had Clara galloping beside the locomotive. One gave her a rifle. Another put her on the bridge while it collapsed. She corrected the stories when she had the patience. Most of the time, she told them what had actually happened and went back to work. She remained at Dry Creek for 23 years. When the railway expanded the depot into a division station, Clara became chief operator. She trained 12 operators, 4 of them women. On her final evening, Clara closed the register and cleaned the key one last time. Stations along the division sent their farewells. Coyote Junction, Mesa Junction, Las Animas. Then a hand she knew came onto the line. Edwin was a dispatcher in Denver by then. His sending was slower, steadier, but she recognized him before he gave his name. They still tell the story of number 4. Clara touched the small bell hanging beside Samuel's watch. Then she answered, "Keep the line honest." She switched off the lamp and locked the office behind her. If Clara's story stayed with you, tell us what you would have done in her place, knowing every minute mattered. Subscribe to Dusty Mercy for more forgotten stories from the American frontier.